Thanks everybody for joining. As Rich already mentioned, I think this is definitely one of those niche fields in cybersecurity, and the way that I came about it, I love to share my experience, and I remember my mentors. So this is a way for me to give back to the community at large. So I've been in cyber for over 15 years. I've worked in finance, telecoms, United States Air Force, offensive operations, threat emulation. I've been incident commander. I've worked on the blue side of things, done forensics. Primarily now I focus on APT emulation, building and certifying red teams, a lot of security solution testing and capability development, as well as the training and education side. So this is today's agenda. Again, we're just going to cover a little bit of that intro, the defensive methodology, a typical day in the role. This is more of the deep dive side of things, those essential skills, not just technical, but soft skills and the mentality, and then bridging those technical skills and soft skills for career growth. The purpose in offensive security is to prepare organizations to face the current threat landscape and stay ahead of attackers, whether it's threat actors, cyber warfare, amateur hackers, misconfigurations, and compliance as well, depending on the industry sector. Some of the things you get to do in offensive security would be, depending on your specialty, would be creating command and control infrastructure on the cloud, on-prem, doing custom tooling. I got to do a lot of custom tooling for the Turla MITRE evaluation, replicating their rootkit, their Kuzar implants, creating custom capabilities that emulated their TTPs, understanding code injection and rootkit capabilities for maintaining that long-term dwell time. So it can be a very rewarding and exciting field. Who can join the field, right? So pretty much anyone. And my criteria for that is if you have a passion to learn and a passion to serve, and specifically when I talk about serving is ensuring that whether it's your organization or your customer, your client, they are in a better place than when you met due to your assessments. It is not a got you. It is not a look how worse you are. It is a synergy between two organizations to help better the defensive side capabilities that they have. So within threat emulation, offensive security, there is a lot of areas that you can specialize in. These are just some areas that I've had personal experience in, which is hardware. This is where you're looking for vulnerabilities or exploits or compromising some hardware mechanism or asset. Aerial, definitely on the, when you look at aerial, it's not just airplanes or copters, but now drones, right? Drone security has definitely skyrocketed with recent world events. The IoT side, the enterprise tech stack, data centers, and space systems, which have given me a wide breadth of experience across a lot of different areas, and it's extremely rewarding. So the basis of threat emulation is the better return on investment is for mature security programs, or when you need to validate defense against specific threat, Salt Typhoon, APTs. That's what threat emulation comes into mind and play with as your service line. It is not beneficial for newer security programs, and I'll cover that in the next slide. And the reason is, so penetration testing, for example, the typical cycle is you identify a vulnerability, you validate it, you report, you have your report out, and great. You may do some lateral movement, you may take advantage of vulnerability, but it's a well-known engagement that's happening. It's not a stealth engagement at all, and it's very narrow in scope and time. On the red teaming side, typically red teams tend to be stealthy. They're larger in scope. You may have hundreds of assets in scope, on cloud, on-prem, hybrid containers, right? And typically for us, the way we like to break down the timeline is 6 to 12 weeks or continuous red teaming, where we've done that in the past. And I've been in other organizations where that scope is even greater, just depending if you're doing a 6-month engagement, right? Want to have a lot of different phases. So one thing that I really enjoy in offensive security is the shift of kind of your psychology, your thinking when it comes to security. You have to adopt that adversary mindset. And one thing that I love to do is my team is, if we have an objective, this is the objective, go, get that objective or solve that objective using your own creativity. I've been in organizations where we're allowed that creativity, and it's been some of the best organizations I worked in, and some of the best managers. So the adversary mindset, one thing that, and I like to compare it, is sometimes you'll have engagement where the objective is domain administrator. That's not always the case. Depending whether it's your red team or your threat emulation, what your goals are, and you're emulating that attacker. So they may have strategic goals. They're very risk adverse. They understand the risk of performing that operation on a live environment with defenses. Typically, you have that long persistence, 2, 3, 4, or 5 months, years, right? As we've seen in recent breaches. No organization is immune to that. You have espionage, and pretty much opportunistic targets as well. And there is a good synergy between the research and development department and the hands-on operators, which I'll cover a little bit more in the capability side of the house. So this is a good example, right? When you look at a typical chain of how you're going to establish a foothold or persistent, you have your loader that does most of your evasive components. You have a stage 0 implant, which is a very bare bones, very basic implant. It may just check in, once every couple of hours, and it may only have the ability to deploy the stage 1, which is a more robust, more capable implant. The threat actor Bandy Bear in their shellcode for stage 0 actually performs a lot of the loader evasion within the shellcode itself. And we see that because they're polymorphic code. It's position independent, as a shellcode should be. They use multi-layers of encryption. So they're using encryption not just on, via TLS, but also encrypting the data before it gets sent over TLS. And they also twist certain aspects of RC4 to make it more challenging to decrypt. And so that kind of falls under the custom encryption. And again, a lot of those anti-forensics evasion properties are done with the shellcode itself. And that's kind of a sign to that methodology of their thinking in their situational aware of what target they're going after, what defenses they may have, especially on the recon phase, that they may spend a year or 2 years doing recon before ever launching a campaign. All right, so Miyamoto Musashi said it best: do nothing which is of no use. And this is a lesson that I learned as I grew in the career and kind of went into the role. And I'll cover what that means as we proceed through. So you have some fun aspects, maybe not some fun aspects of the role, but pretty much the way that I look at it, every team lead, every senior member, even juniors or newcomers, interns, they get an opportunity to partake with the clients in the tasking. This is when you're meeting the client, understanding their services, sometimes educating the client, because they may want a red team assessment, but actually they're not mature enough. They may benefit better from a pen test. And then we have a training and research. So this is that continuous skill building for the team and the team members, and researching threat actors, researching novel techniques that we build into our in-house capabilities. And then you have the execution day, which is typically your most fun aspect. And you may be traveling, you may be doing an assumed breach or no knock. So assumed breach is, the client maybe gives you a workstation with low privileges, and you operate from there, and you try to find a way to escalate and move to your objectives. And then I highlighted document because as I learned, documentation is very key when it comes to any operation, whether it's pen testing, red teaming, purple teaming, it doesn't matter. The way that I always recommend is perform your assessment and have your draft report up and document that as you go through. That way, at the end, you have all your artifacts. You're not trying to find, well, what worked, what didn't work, and you have a complete picture, and then you can start refining that draft report, send it to your peer review, and then send it to quality assurance, and then you can deliver that to the client in a speedy way, rather than waiting 2 weeks, 3 weeks to deliver a report after the report out. And then on the reporting out, or we'll report out what we found on the client. There'll be status updates, given that it's 6 to 12 weeks, right? There'll be status updates either daily or weekly, depending on what they want, to those trusted agents. Not everybody in the organization knows that we're in there. So, and this is these 5 areas are crucial for you being able to kind of progress through the field and embrace that role. So the way that I've normally seen it and structure it myself is you have your operations, you have your infrastructure, and you have your research. And then we silo those based on, for example, operations may need a capability during the client meeting, and they need something to, be cooked in-house, and research would work on that. But everybody gets to rotate through each section in each silo, and that way you can have an operator going to infrastructure, learn there, they like it, they may stay there longer. It benefits them understanding how you're setting up your offensive, infrastructure with your redirectors, your APIs and things of that nature. And then they may even transition to research and, given that opportunity to expand on their ingenuity, which normally you do see for a lot of offensive roles. Some of the best, again, organizations have given me that aspect to, hey, you're off rotation for 4 weeks, research whatever you want, or research something for this upcoming operation. So it's been very rewarding. And then, you can kind of fill in whatever team member is lacking, or they have an emergency, PTO, whatever the case is, and you can fill in that gap. That way you have a well-rounded team. When it comes to client and taskings, client trust is number one, end of story. And the reason that is, imagine a client network as a very, where it could be regulatory, legal, HIPAA, high tech, but it's a very sensitive, very almost intimate side for the client, right? And now they're going to trust an organization to come in there and perform offensive actions. So you need to understand what sensitive data they may be hosting. Most of the time you have a mutual non-disclosure agreement, liability, insurance. And then for us personally, what I like to do is build that relationship over the sale, because sometimes organization doesn't have a budget, right, of a Fortune 500, but you can still perform a white glove service, as we call it, to help that organization still get that Fortune 500 experience. And you're now helping, a smaller business, medium-sized business, or nonprofit get the same sense of security that a larger organization would have. Threat actors, just they're opportunistic. They go after whatever target they can, lowest hanging fruit. And some of those are those smaller businesses or medium-sized businesses that don't have a secure maturity program. And then it's industry dependent, whether it's energy sector, healthcare, telecom. This is where you get the experience in those sectors, or bring people on board with experience in those sectors, and you can round out your service line to that client. And we're building that trust. The client trusts us, we trust the client. And that's pretty much why I have everyone join those client meetings, so they can get that wealth of experience and understand that it's more in that relationship and kind of doing, the good by the client. So as we understand the service line and the client needs, like I said, they may not need a red team. They may not be ready for that. Typically, if they ask for a red team, for example, and I'm doing threat emulation and maybe like, hey, let's do a purple team first. We can get all your gaps and detections sorted out, and then we can do a red team later on where you can test your detections, you can test that, or a purple team and then go into threat emulation for a specific threat actor that they have put in, countermeasures for those techniques, tactics, and procedures. So the client will pass on that requirements, the service, you got to highlight what value and the return on investment is for them, and then you execute with flexibility of the client needs, timeframes, holidays, whatever the case is, we have to be flexible. Again, on the planning preparation, this is when you onboard that client. For threat emulation specifically, depending on what they're asking, we'll match them with a threat actor card based on cyber intelligence. And then we go through objectives, timelines, and expectations. And then you do that internal capability assessment to see if you can, from day zero, you can give them those, whatever they're asking for, that objective, or you have to do research and development or procure the capability in some fashion, and then resource allocations. So on the operational cycle, this is typically what it looks like. On the plan and design, we execute, we analyze the executions, we do the reporting, we get feedback for us as well. You should be open to constructive feedback, any sort of feedback as you're doing operations, as you're growing in this field, because that's what's going to help you kind of grow and understand, maybe this could have gone better, or this went well, this didn't go so well. And then also, personal feedback on the way that you may handle a situation. So if you go, for example, CISA has a great diagram, CISA.gov, on threat actor analysis. And if you see here, they have a reconnaissance, initial access, lateral movement, and potential impact. For example, if a client came in, hey, we want this chain. We know that we have to do recon. We have to exploit a vulnerability in their initial access, and then move with RDP, obtain administrator credentials, and all this becomes an attack path analysis. And we formulate our attack path after our meetings, and then we present that to the client, and they approve or disapprove on certain scope, and then we execute on that attack path. So on the development side of things for capability engineering, right, when we're emulating a custom capability, such as at Bendy Bear when they modify RC4, for example, we had to go and do the custom key scheduling algorithm, modify the pseudo-random generator, add an initial XOR operation, and extend the state array from the 256 to 258. And we're able to do that, and then that way we can replicate that signature across the network when we're performing the operation. More on the emulating that threat actor, you'll have to kind of research those evasion techniques, implementation. We go from research and development, pre-ops, QA phase, where we're testing against different versions of operating systems, different environments, and then it gets approved for an operation at the end of that phase. And for example, here you'll see that in this part you'll see that there's anti-debugging, anti-sandbox, virtual environment. We're wanting to find sensitive strings, and you may use strings.exe, and you see that super sauce is not actually found on the release binary. And that's because you use compile time hashing for strings and obfuscation, so you're able to instead of having your domain name and your config on the implant, everything's kind of encrypted and hidden from static and some dynamic analysis. And you have to understand the IOCs that you're going to give out, right? So that same EXE, when EDR products are looking at you, you'll typically see that you'll have, static analysis, machine learning. They'll look for suspicious APIs, pretty much any executable DLL that may perform memory functionality, allocation of memory, or is able to do screenshots or things of that nature that typically are susceptible to deeper analysis, you can actually hide that away, again, by using certain techniques. And then you can actually fool, again, on the import table, the APIs that you're actually using. So in this case, we imported some benign APIs. When we deploy it, it sees, hey, it's just a very benign program from the API side. Now, the heuristic sides and how it's operating, you have to understand that too. Do research on that. You actually end up using a lot of defensive tools to be able to highlight what IOCs your capabilities are giving off, whether it's EDRs, whether it's network telemetry, host telemetry, AMZ or ETW telemetry as well. You get a good picture of what your indicators of compromise are, because eventually you will get, at some point or another, either that capability will be burned, or you're burning it yourself, just depending on what the scenario is. And you have to be able to give that to the client and say, hey, this is how we operate it. This is the IOCs. If your capability is going to be burned, then you give them the IOCs, you give them a hash as well, and you exchange that information. Again, this is more testing how commands are inputted through the quick and dirty C2, how commands are interpreted and inputted and executed. If there's any issues with, like, for example, the TAC-C, and realistically, you won't actually be executing PowerShell, but this is a testing phase. So we kind of just run it through as many dynamic tests as we can. So on the threat actor capability, then you have to go against real defenses. And here for example, they wanted to do an LSAS dump for dumping credentials, and we did it against particular EDR vendor that the client had. We had to emulate that, and we see that it was successful in dumping that LSAS. Same thing against another EDR vendor. Again, successful. So we know that it works against X, Y, and Z vendor, and we can move forward. On that development side, as I was saying about having your APIs and stuff, sometimes you may even develop your own custom APIs or custom API wrappers, and a capability, if it's written in C, for example, it will be C runtime independent, so you don't have to worry about that dependency when you're operating. Again, this is more on the understanding how memory works, different types of memory techniques. This is where we're doing drip allocations or drip sections, and we're instead of allocating one large chunk of memory, we're going to do small chunks of memory, and ensuring that we have low entropy on our shellcode, and be able to execute that capability in memory. As I already covered on the execution side, think of it as this image of a lot of cogwheels have to work together in order to be able to have execution happen. As I mentioned, legal, mutual NDAs, meetings about what's in scope, what's not in scope, and it does take a process to lead to execution, but it's absolutely paramount that all paperwork is done before you even think of getting close to an execution at all, and that it's in scope. So on the execution time, when we're having fun, right, we operate, we update the client, and we analyze with them if it's a threat emulation side. This is where they may have an alert from their security operations center, or in horrible cases, if you are operating and you see previous indicators of compromise, then you have to absolutely call a full stop, notify the client, and they'll go through their incident handling procedures. Sometimes I've been in positions where they're like, hey, can you help us do, initial triage and whatnot? And we help the client on the spot. We don't worry about anything else, no charge. The breach for anyone is literally the worst day of their life as an organization. You have your chain of your trusted agent who you are in constant communication with, and then you're able to deconflict any actions that maybe the SOC sees, and they're like, hey, is this you guys? Or is this, something that we should look into? So it's imperative to have everything, kind of documented, timetable, who documented at what workstation, and be able to use that for deconfliction purposes and then for your report as well. So essential skills. For the service line, this is what I covered already with the threat actor analysis, understanding attack frameworks, technical proficiency, and then the attack path analysis as well. This kind of comes together within your service line of your individuals that you have in your team, and you're able to have a comprehensive service line that you're actually able to give the customer. Again, it's about the customer, so give them the best return on investment. You don't want to just say, oh, we scanned something and you didn't actually perform the service that you were hired to do. Sometimes on the capability side of the house or operators, we have individuals with reverse engineering backgrounds, programming backgrounds. They understand the operating system fundamentals, not just Windows, but iOS, Android, IoT, Linux, and they're able to get all that experience to do, attack path analysis or build a capability for a different system. There's been times where I have to emulate some capability for a Linux system or some, IBM system instead. And it's very different than, engineering capability for Windows for the most part. You have to understand the differences between the two operating systems, how things are loaded in Windows, how things are loaded in Linux. And especially if you have to do reverse engineering as well. So it gets pretty technical, which is the fun part. Infrastructure is a must, right? So this is where, we give opportunities to work in AWS, Azure, DigitalOcean, and other cloud providers where you familiarize yourself with the cloud environment, the virtualization, applications, and the networking. And that way you are able to kind of operate in maybe you're routing traffic from one cloud to another cloud, to a reverse proxy, a VPN, and then back to on-prem for your client, your command and control system. So you have to understand the different services, how can they be abused to appear legitimate, and then give that, give that full experience of a actual threat actor utilizing those technologies to circumvent certain controls for organizations. Communication. I think several people have mentioned this already, but communication is key. It doesn't matter if you are literally the best hacker, red teamer, capability developer in the universe. If you cannot communicate effectively to your team and to the client, it's very challenging to be successful, in my opinion. This comes into understanding what's relatable to the client. If the client's in the energy sector, you're not going to be necessarily, and they don't do healthcare, you're not necessarily going to be telling them about HIPAA and high-tech requirements. You have to understand what requirements they may have and how this impacts the stakeholders, right? What's important to them, and highlight how it impacts them. Comfort is the enemy of growth. This is where I said that, you kind of grow out of your comfort zone. I started out doing weapon systems on F-16s and AC-130s. I was loading weapons and maintaining weapon systems, doing electrical analysis and all this stuff. Then I transitioned to education and training because my passion to teach. And then I was given the opportunity to go into cyber as well. And, this is an image of an exercise in NATO where I got to meet the former CISO of the Air Force, NATO counterparts, dignitaries, and it was a great experience that we got to explore. I got to be able to teach like 57 different teams on detections while we were simultaneously doing operations, doing emulation of X, Y, and Z threat actors. So you can come into this field pretty much from anywhere. I've seen individuals with psychiatry backgrounds that were going medical, they were legal, whatever the case is, and they've been very successful in offensive security. So this is typically a cycle that I'm more familiar with for myself. This is an image of a personal AD lab that I've had, for example. And again, it's the education, the research, the experimenting, employment, on-the-job training, and sometimes maybe you want to find a specialty. whether that's a programming language, whether that's an area or aerial space systems, right? You can be a jack of all trades, master of none, or you can specialize in a specific area, and that is completely up to you. But offensive security allows you to have that flexibility of exploring different areas. I started with like Python and Go, and then C and C++, Zig, understanding SQL, MySQL, or Oracle databases, things of that nature. There's a plethora of certifications as well within the industry. There's great university programs as well. There's not a discussion what's better, what's worse on when it comes to education, but there's a lot of ways to get education and hands-on experience within offensive security. And that is my presentation. Thank you for your time. I think we have a couple of minutes if anyone has a couple of questions, and I will be in the Slack channel as well.